Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Red Raider tight ends made a dent in the win over Texas last week. What are they going to be cooking up in Manhattan, Kansas this time around? We'll investigate. Also looking to break a deadlock between Chris and myself as Locked On Texas Tech goes up against the spread once again in the Big 12 and beyond. And we'll also take a closer look on the defensive side of things for the Red Raiders. Does Tim Deruder have the depth up front to contain a varied offensive attack for K-State? We discuss next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right.
Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride once again on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Casey Cowan with the only Chris Level and would like to thank our friends at Underdog for bringing you today's episode. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Again, with the promo code Locked On at UnderdogFantasy.com. Chris, we're toward the end of the week here and not far away from the Red Raiders hitting the road for the first of two consecutive away from Jones Stadium, Manhattan, Kansas. Going to be the scene as Tech takes on Kansas State. And, man, as we continue to look ahead to the Purple Wildcats, we've talked about them, being weaponized in all three phases of the game and, a team that's really a handful to say the least. And kind of does feel like we've had to use the entire week to really try to get a load of K-State because kicking off the show here today, we spent time earlier in the week talking Deuce Vaughn, and we're only now getting to the guy that's actually taking the snaps, Adrian Martinez. And, man, he's looked about as dangerous as anybody in purple and silver, especially as of late. So there's plenty of reason to pay attention to number 22 and some of those other guys at the skill positions, but the dude that's orchestrating it all in Martinez is certainly capable, maybe through the air, but definitely is a part of that rushing attack as a ball carrier.
Adrian Martinez has been talked about a lot this week, and deservedly so. He's gotten a lot of pub. He's done a lot of interviews. I've seen him do 2 national interviews, and I think he all is deserving. I even saw some sort of metric that would indicate that Kansas State's win at Oklahoma is the best win that anybody's got the whole season of anybody. Because I think that the way it framed it, that 22 of 25 teams would maybe have lost in Norman, of the top 25 ranked teams currently or whatever. So anyway, I don't know how they figured that out. Bottom line, it was a good win.
Good looking graphic. I saw the same thing. So okay. I don't know what they're I don't know how they figured it out either, but I was interested. And Texas Tech was a little further down the list, like number 10 or 12 or something.
I was intrigued. The question though that I have though is that who is the real Adrian Martinez? Because there's a reason it didn't really work at Nebraska. It wasn't all his fault. There's a reason that they weren't, very successful throwing the ball earlier this season. But he had a doozy of a performance, an all-timer in Norman, and just had Brent Venables scratching his head, not knowing what was going on, and just felt like he had no answers. So I'm not real sure what we get out of Adrian Martinez this weekend in Manhattan. That's because I told you this, but 134 yards on average per game. That's the lowest in the Big 12 by far, and that's what he's averaging passing yardage. And he only has 2 touchdown passes the entire season, and so I don't know what we get. Do we get the Oklahoma version, of how he played the Sooners? Or do we get kind of a lot of what we saw in Nebraska and earlier on this season to where it's like, man, I don't know. This may not work. So I really don't know. I just, and I'm not asking necessarily for the real Adrian Martinez to stand up. I just don't want that guy to be the OU version of him, whoever stands up. But
Yeah, no question.
It's worth asking the question, I guess, is my point. And he's going to be going against a pretty good Texas Tech defense. I mean, that can't be overstated either.
Well, and it kind of seems like I hesitate to even say this out loud. It's like seeing fawns in the wild. You don't want to scare it away, but I don't know if I want to call it a deep defense, but a deeper defense than maybe what we've been accustomed to seeing for some time on that side of the ball here in Lubbock, and particularly where it could matter a lot, obviously coming up on Saturday, within that defensive front, within the box, the front seven, whatever way you want to look at it. And that was something that defensive coordinator Tim Deruder actually spoke about, Chris, was the fact that it did seem like, the frontline guys can go harder because the next in line guys are not really, generating any kind of drop off as far as whenever you have to give these guys a rest and continue to try to keep fresh legs and fresh, violent hands on the field. Here's defensive coordinator Tim Deruder.
I've been really pleased with those guys since last spring. I knew coming in here, when you see them, they're undersized as far as not thickness, but length. And so you wonder, are they going to be big enough in the Big 12 to be able to make plays and get away from big blockers that want to hold them? And they play with such great motors. And then the other thing I think that's helped them is, when you have guys like, Miles and Phillip and V, they're fresher now. Where a year ago, I think they were playing a lot of snaps on their own. And, and again, when we're only playing 60 snaps, I don't know their exact snap count. I don't have it right here in front of me. I think that they can go harder longer because they know, hey, if I'm out, somebody else is coming in, and they're not necessarily going to drop, from a 1 to maybe a 3 or 4 level player. It's 1 and 2 are pretty close. So they've been playing with great energy, and they keep fighting in their pass rush, and they're making really timely plays for us.
Tony Bradford, Jalen Hutchings, the guys that comment was centered around, and then Philip Bleedy, Miles Cole. Who's V? Who am I missing?
Vital Scott.
Okay, yeah. Those are the guys that Coach Deruder's referencing there up front for Texas Tech defensively.
Yeah, and I think you'll get a bit deeper on the edge this weekend too. I think it's worth pointing out because if you go back and look at how many players actually played versus Texas, it's only I think you were in the 16, 17 total players range on defense. But again, there's only 60 plays, so you can kind of get away with that, and you did go into overtime and all that. But Texas only ran 60 plays, but as the season goes along and those start to add up and you get into some games where the opposition is running into the 70s and 80s and even 90s, you're not sure what you're going to get into. You can't have ground down your dudes. They've got to have a rest and you've got to, but I think Dimitri Moore is back this weekend. He's an outside linebacker, defensive end type. I think you're going to hear the name of Robert Wooten, who hasn't played down, I don't think, here yet. He's been here a little over a year. I think he's going to play versus the Wildcats as well. And I think that just adds to the depth for Tyree and Josiah Pierre and those outside guys like that just gives them more of a rest, and you can kind of get into a rotation a little bit to where you can kind of ease up some of their workload as we go along. But I'm kind of, Robert Wooten, he transferred here from Virginia Tech, and it was last summer, a year ago. So last year he has to sit out because of the transfer rules and all those things, and he's not a graduate or anything. But anyway, he had to sit out, and I'm kind of intrigued to see if he can give you something, because it's just a name that I think a lot of people are like, who's this guy? I don't know anything about him, but I know that the previous staff was very high on him and felt like that he was absolutely worth taking. And so he's been sitting here on ice, and he was dinged up earlier on in this season. So that's why he's going to, I think, make his debut 3-4 games in here. But just another name on that defensive side to add to that front seven that could potentially help you.
As far as depth that's making an impact, I'd say so far so good this season for Texas Tech. Still more football left to be played than you have played. And, man, if stuff like that is going on where maybe you are still yet to see more help come on board, get really excited about what the future looks like up front for Texas Tech and Tim Deruder on the defensive side of things. Chris Level mentions some names there that you may hear called coming up this weekend. I want to get to coming up ahead some names you heard called to a greater extent last week than we had before. Are we going to hear those again in Manhattan, Kansas? Tell you who I'm referring to coming up ahead. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at Underdog Fantasy, spicing up your college football season. And Chris, you were on the money last week, man, like an underdog guru. Miles Price was an offering from Chris Level last week as far as the Red Raider that might get busy. Goes out and has a career day as far as the receptions with 13 on the day. Are you feeling anyone this week? Should we keep riding the hot hand with Miles Price maybe again?
To me, I think you're going to get one of your running backs. You're going to have a big, the question is which one. That's the hard part.
It's not easy to answer.
Yeah, because the way Kansas State plays defense, they're going to give you some opportunities, I think, to run it a little bit. But again, which guy is that? Is that Saradrick? Is that Taj? I don't know. But you know what? Since they've been kind of alternating weeks, I'll say Taj Brooks.
I'd be happy to see either one of them make that kind of dent, man. And we hadn't been able to get both on the same day with some type of balanced production, but it has been one or the other. And for the most part, I think Tech has generated a rushing attack that has to be accounted for by the defense. So hopefully that happens coming up again with Taj Saradrick or whoever wants a crack at it. Donovan Smith, maybe somebody that could get busy as a ball carrier here or there. Take Chris's advice, trek out on your own path, do your own thing at underdogfantasy.com. Get over there, use the promo code Locked On, and Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. So you deposit $100, you get $100 for free. Go to underdogfantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Again, go to underdogfantasy.com and use that promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On, and kick it up a notch with the college football pick'em this weekend at underdogfantasy.com. Thanks for making us a part of your day. It's Locked On Texas Tech, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're getting ready for Red Raiders and Wildcats, K-State and Tech from Manhattan, Kansas, coming up this weekend. And Chris, you were touching on a couple of guys a moment ago on the defensive side of the football that are maybe off the shelf and back on the field. Some names that we'll hear maybe for the first time coming up this weekend. Robert Wooten among those. And I wanted to get to, on the offensive side here quickly with you, some names that have been out there, but we hadn't really heard called to a great extent, at least not consistently this season. And that among those tight ends, thinking about some of those guys making big plays, man. It wasn't like you're filling up the box score necessarily, but these were heavy impact plays made by Cup and Tharp last week against Texas.
Yeah, and talking to Coach McGuire on his show about just that particular group, I think they really made an impact in that game versus Texas. I think that they're looking for them to make an impact as you go forward this season, because Josh Cochran coaches that group. I think Zach Kitley, and he's done a good job. I think Coach Kitley trying to figure out, how to create mismatches with these guys, because you got 6'7", you've got 6'9", and you've got a guy like Henry Teeter that missed last week that is back this week. But Baylor Cup, man, 6'7", and Mason Tharp 6'9". You got to figure out ways to incorporate those guys. And I think that a guy like Baylor Cup, really, he's an all-world recruit. If you go looking back at like what he was ranked and all the people that offered him a scholarship and all these things, Texas Tech just doesn't get many of these guys like this, if ever. And I think that his issue really has been, can he stay healthy? And I'm sure he's thinking when he gets dinged up against Houston, it's like, okay, here we go again. But he just missed the one game and he's back. But it's also because I haven't been able to be out there because I've been dinged up and dealing with injuries all the time. I don't have any confidence. And after talking to Baylor some this week, I think that he's starting to feel pretty good about things. He's like, I love coming in Sundays and Mondays because I know Zach's going to have, something drawn up for the tight ends and how to get us open, how to create a mismatch and this and that. And, he did some of that this past weekend for sure, because Mason and Baylor both made plays, and they were huge at the time. One scores a touchdown, one sets you up on the 1 foot line. Baylor made 3 other catches too. So I would look for those guys to continue to be, important parts of what you're trying to do on offense, especially as you get into the chess match of the Big 12 conference. And Henry Teeter clearly is your best blocking, tight end and in the
fullback tight end.
There you go. Yeah, H back, whatever we want to call.
There you
him.
go, H back.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean that group was it tons of potential, man.
Well, and it made me think about your comment, which I thought was so interesting. And I can't even remember what episode it was on, but go back in the archives here on YouTube if you missed it. But you were talking about Cliff Kingsbury texting Zach Kittley saying regarding Donovan Smith or quarterbacks, like, hey, things can click in a day here or there for a quarterback, and all of a sudden you see this growth and you have success. And I was wondering about these tight ends, Chris, because it's not like they've been non-existent on the field so far this season. Before Texas, you've seen some attempted connections that just weren't there and were off, by a foot or a millimeter or whatever it might be here or there. But it wasn't like, at least in my opinion, they weren't trying, at least to some extent, to involve them. And with so much success last time around, as far as the impact they had on the game, and I want to see it happen, of course, so I'm halfway wishing, dreaming, and rooting for it to happen. I'm hoping maybe it's a launching pad of some sorts to really get them in the mix, because I just think, tight ends, I've been so envious as a Tech fan over the years. There's so many great tight ends who have killed us in the Big 12 Conference.
Yeah.
I mean, just over and over and over. Missouri, Oklahoma State. They've been
Iowa State
been across that landscape. So I feel like when you have a great one, and maybe not even great, but just really good, that's just an athlete on the field that's hard to replicate. It seems like there's always a mismatch somewhere for a tight end, whether it's against a smaller guy or maybe outmaneuvering a bigger guy. I just love to have one with an ability to make an impact. And you were just describing those two dudes in Cup and Tharp and the measurables they have. Pretty special, right? And in the red zone, kind of really gets you to dreaming. But easier said than done. So I don't know if it was something that Texas was given Zach Kittley as far as looks and things like that, or Donovan Smith, or if we'll see that continue. Do you think that it was more of an emphasis, or maybe just something that was there as far as the matchup last week?
I think both. I think they've been trying to incorporate new ways to get them involved, but I also think that some of this is how teams defend you and what they try to take away, and if they're going to try to keep everything underneath and play coverage, because Kansas State, their defensive scheme is very similar to how NC State set it up. So it's more of a 3-man front. They want to kind of keep things in front of them. They're also going to try to show you that you can, hey man, you got all this room up here, you can run it. And then they quickly take it away. Their safeties are heavily involved.
Yeah.
But again, it's also part of this too, is just really about Donovan clicking with these guys and Donovan clicking with Kittley on what works, what you like. And then Donovan being comfortable enough to like, throw that ball up to one of those cats, man. Let them go get it.
True. Yeah.
Let them play basketball with it and just go jump up and high point it or whatever you want to do. And, there's something to be said there about taking some chances, because they're going to win some of those 50-50 matchups if you put the ball in the right place.
Well, and that's a process too, to kind of develop that trust, that chemistry, to know like where he wants it or what move maybe Donovan can anticipate one of them making. I mean, that again is a process in and of itself. But yeah, you'd love to see them able to use just some of that raw athleticism and the measurables that you just can't really teach or coach otherwise whenever it's convenient for Texas Tech. So maybe we'll see some of that coming up this weekend against Kansas State. And, as one of those old rugged 150-pound twisted steel and sex appeal 2-3-8 tight ends, Chris. Tight ends, fullbacks. I was a reserve fullback too. They never go out of style. Never.
It's like your favorite wrestler back in the day, Michael Hayes, and he went by PS, and the PS stands for pure and sexy.
I got to tell you, that is one I'm not familiar with. I'm not sure if you're making that up entirely or if that was a real wrestler.
I'm being 1,000% serious. He was part of the.
We don't fish.
He was
the
part of the
catalog.
He was part of the Freebirds, man. The Freebirds and the Von Erichs. But yeah, Michael PSAs.
I didn't know if you were newer or older, but
no, this is older. This is 80s.
Back.
Yeah, this is 80s. Yes.
I can respect that,
but
I will consult the archives tonight after the show.
But he'd also rock with the Twisted Seal and Sex Appeal and that whole thing. So that's what we were thinking of it. It jogged the memory. So I really, this is all your fault. I mean, you're the one that led me down this road. You just didn't know it.
I have no doubt that most things, including this right here on this guy, my fault. Coming up on the other side, we are looking to break a tie. Chris and I are taking a look at this weekend's slate. 3-2. We were above water last week, but just kissing sisters, no clear winner, and nobody enjoys that experience. So we got another handful of ball games to get to coming up ahead as Locked On Texas Tech goes head up with the spread. That's coming up next. But first, back at it with our good buddy Armen Williams with Schooley Mitchell, North America's #1 business cost reduction company. And you see it right there in bold print on the screen. On average, Chris, just on average, 28% is the number whenever we're talking about essential business services reduced. Think about what that kind of savings just on average and possibly more could do for your business. And Chris, I think so often about sometimes who we're talking to in this audience and who's tailor-made right here for Armen Williams to really help them out. And it's those small business owners where really it could be a number even smaller than 28% at some point, but could provide some great relief. You never know. So savewitharmen.com is where they need to go, right?
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, and you should be, you can see Armen on the screen right there. And I guarantee if you see him and his name right there, you know that a PS belongs right between Armen and Williams. And it stands for the same things that Michael Hayes was all about. But no, in all seriousness, man, Armen's great people, man. He's wanting to help Red Raider owned and operated businesses and just try to help you save money and try to dig into some of the different things. And you see all those different categories right there. And you're renting dumpsters. You got gasoline that, you fuel of cars. You got, telephones and a bank. I mean, whatever. He can dig into that and help you out, try to save some money and, bundle or unbundle or whatever you're looking for. But it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, the old fandangle. There ain't no upfront costs. Starts with a free analysis, and then he only shares in any savings that you may be able to find. So think about some extra wiggle room for that business as you get ready for 2023 with our friend Armen Williams at Schooley Mitchell. Head on to the website now and get to freeing up some cash at savewitharmen.com. And we can't forget about our friends at Flatlands Grain, 30 quick minutes north of the LBK in Hale Center, Texas, America. Those harvest gears are soon to begin turning, and Flatlands Grain is standing by for you. Maybe those ducks aren't quite in a row on your end, but no worries. Flatlands Grain, your backstop. No job too small, too big, whether it's thousands of bushels, one truckload, market analysis, crop experience, and of course, just keeping animals fed. Flatlands Grain has got all of those bases covered. So give them a holler today at 806-839-2522 or check them out at flatlandsgrain.com. Wanting to help continue to be that reliable resource for the farming and ranching families all across the high plains this harvest season. The Red Raiders at Flatlands Grain are saying wreck 'em Tech. Again, give them a call at 806-839-2522. See them in Hale Center, Texas, or visit them online at flatlandsgrain.com. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. Please do subscribe if you have not yet. And hang tight with us this weekend as we'll have coverage following the ball game. Red Raiders hopefully giving us reason to be celebratory in the coverage. had a good time last time around. The old morning after report was a sweet tasting morning, Chris, in West Texas, in part spurred on by the fact that I knew at least I didn't take an L in our first go-round of Locked On Texas Tech head up with the spread. You and I tied, which is not a whole lot, of a better feeling, I don't guess, compared to actually taking that loss. But it ain't losing. It ain't losing. I just want to state that for the record.
I'd rather tie than lose, but I hate ties. I don't mind telling you. Like the whole soccer thing, it drives me crazy, man. Flip a coin. So you got to get a result here, man. But no, we tied three games to 3 wins, 2 losses each.
That's right. So we're here to break that up this time around. Got a few in the Big 12 to take a look at, and a couple of interesting ones across the nation as well. But let's get started in the league, Chris, and let's start with the Sooners, who were knocked off by these K-State Wildcats and will be looking to bounce back against the Horned Frogs of Texas Christian. The Sooners a little less than a touchdown favorite, minus 6.5 is what I'm seeing. What are you liking here with OU and TCU?
Here's my stuff on this game. Okay, you ready? Max Duggan actually has played really good this season, and he's got just a handful of rushing yards. I would have told you before the season, one, I wasn't sure if he was going to start, and he didn't, but he came in for Chandler Morris's injury. But it's the way he's thrown the ball. He's completing over 77% of his passes, I think. He's got 8 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, and TCU's also averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground. However, yeah, Oklahoma, you know how many times they've beaten TCU in a row? 8. Okay, and it ain't stopping here. Okay, it's going to 9. Okay, there's no better motivation than being embarrassed and losing. And you know how many times that Oklahoma has lost back-to-back games in the regular season since 2000? It's happened one time, once.
That's less than I thought, and I knew it would be very few.
And that was back in 2020.
Wow.
But it ain't happening here. They're winning this game, and I think they win it by more than 6.5 points. So Oklahoma it wins, but maybe TCU covers, maybe. But I'm taking Oklahoma to bounce back minus 6.5.
Yeah, I gotta roll with you here. The Sooners ticked off, and the next team's in purple too. Like, that's just bad luck for Texas Christian. Like, switch up the color. They need to go blackout or pull out those god-awful blood uniforms or whatever those were back in the day. Do something, but shuck the purple.
and here's the other thing. Dylan Gabriel, okay, OU's quarterback, he played phenomenal last week, okay, versus Kansas State. And yet nobody's talking about it because it was how bad that Sooner defense played. He threw 4 touchdown passes, over 300 yards, didn't have an interception. I think he ran it for about 70 yards. And again, you'd never know it. He played really, really well. But so if that continues, TCU's in trouble. They'll take their first L on the season.
There you go. Oklahoma State, Baylor, the Bears, a slight favorite, minus 2.5. This is one of the spicier ones of the weekend, Chris. I mean, a great conference championship game we all remember, and I'm looking forward to this next go-around.
Here's my fascinating number on this game. Okay, Spencer Sanders, we think maybe the best quarterback in the league. He was preseason offensive player of the year. He hadn't really had any hiccups yet this season. He's got 10 TDs, 1 interception, okay? He throws 12 interceptions last season. 7 of them came against Baylor. 7 of the 12 came against the Bears. Okay, in those 2 games, 1 in the regular season, 1 in the Big 12 title game. The team split these games. Okay, so this is technically the 3rd time in a calendar year, if you will, that they're going to end up playing. But I think I'm taking Baylor here minus 2 at home. I'm not sure that Oklahoma State defense is ready for this kind of primetime matchup just yet. I think Baylor has already kind of gone through some of their struggles up at BYU. I think they bounced back and played a really good game at Iowa State last weekend, but I'm going to take Baylor in a close one. But those 2 points, not enough to scare me off. I'll take Baylor minus 2.
It's going to be hard to break a tie if we're agreeing on everything, but so far we are. That's just the way it is. I think Baylor's defense, and I'm really with you on the same point for the most part as far as comparing the 2 teams on the defensive side of the football. I just think the Bears have a much better ability to neutralize Spencer Sanders and get in the backfield and make it tough on him, not to mention maybe some ball carriers, but particularly getting after the quarterback. So, yeah, I'm going to roll with the Bears there, -2.5. Iowa State, -3, visiting the Jayhawks, Chris. This one kind of interesting to me is Iowa State experiences a tough one. Got a coach melting down. I mean, it's rough when the players are having to talk the coach down, for crying out loud, with Matt Campbell there. How are you seeing this one shape up with the Jayhawks and the Cyclones being a slight favorite?
Well, Iowa State is favored here, as you mentioned, okay? And this is a home game for Kansas, folks. Right. So at first glance, I'm like, why is Iowa State favored?
Double take.
Somebody knows something. Somebody knows something. And I'm going with the somebodies, okay? I don't think anybody as good as Kansas's offense has been. They've scored 26 touchdowns and kicked 2 field goals this year. That's how good Kansas's offense has been, averaging over 40 points a game. But again, nobody's talked about how bad their defense is. They're giving up over 400, okay, to opposing offenses. I think this game is all about Hunter Deckers to me, because right now it's going to be strength on strength in this game. Iowa State's defense is really good. And I think, Kansas State's offense is really good. So that's strength on strength. But, Hunter Deckers, if he's got a pulse, okay, he ought to be able to outplay how bad Kansas's defense is. And so I think that Vegas is telling you what's up here. I think they're telling you what's up. I'm taking Iowa State -3, and the party will stop, and we'll hear a lot of noise, or the noise will stop, I guess, with Lance Leipold and the Jayhawks and all that, just for a little bit.
Interesting. And this is where this will get a little more interesting, as we will diverge. You're going with the somebodies, I think, because you are a somebody. You know what I am? I'm a nobody. And I'm going with the nobodies. Give me the Jayhawks. Are you kidding me? Disrespect on the home field? What else do they have to do? They won a Final Four matchup last weekend with the Duke Blue Devils. It wasn't even close, an embarrassment to Krzyzewski. Give me a break. I feel like Kansas has got to come out hacked off, Chris. If there was ever a point, right, this season for them to say, now, damn it, pay attention to us. We're good enough. We're smart enough. And we're worth it, or whatever that saying is.
Saturday Night Live, yes.
Yeah. This is it. An underdog on your home field to a team that's done what Iowa State has done. And I get your Kansas, but no, this one's too juicy. I'm going to go here with the Jayhawks. Level's going to go with the Cyclones, -3. I'm going +3. West Virginia, Texas, another team that's going to be hacked off. Luckily, West Virginia is not coming to town in red and black uniforms, but they're coming to town as a -9.5 underdog. Chris, who do you like here?
Here's what I did not know until I looked it up to be sure, because I read it and I was like, this just can't be right. Do you realize West Virginia leads the all-time series versus Texas 6-5? So 6-5, West Virginia is. But here's the part that shocked me. 4 of those 6 wins, okay? 4 of those 6 wins have been in Austin.
Ooh.
I just
like that.
I would not have guessed it. I think West Virginia is much better than their record. Because they've lost against the Jayhawks that you were talking about a second ago. They lost them at home. The other loss was basically a road game against a Pitt team that's now ranked. I think that West Virginia's defensive line is actually pretty good. I think JT Daniels is pretty good, their transfer quarterback. And I don't know what to make of Texas after this weird week that they've had. I don't know about their quarterback play. Is Quinn Ewers back this week? And we still see Hudson Card? Are they pissed off, or they melted down? Are they looking ahead to Oklahoma? Lots of questions. I do think, though, they figure out a way to win this game by double digits. It may not be pretty. It may be 24-14. It may be 27-17, but it's at 9.5, and I'm gonna say Texas barely covers this one.
Athlete-only meeting this week for the Longhorns, Chris. It's September, by the way. And what they didn't tell you was it was leaders of the swimming and diving team that were conducting the meeting. It wasn't actually football players that they were referencing there. Longhorns going to be mad. Sorry, Neil Brown. No way. -9.5. Yeah, I'm rolling with you in Texas here. Stepping outside the Big 12 Conference, a couple of interesting numbers here. I thought interesting matchups. Alabama -17.5 at Arkansas. I mean, I get what this reads like on paper, but is there anything that interests you about this one?
I wonder about Arkansas because Arkansas largely outplayed A&M last week. But there's a few weird plays and the field goal off the top of the upright and just some weird things that went on. You'll either get a really spicy Arkansas bunch or you're going to get a bunch that's feeling sorry for themselves. But I feel like they'll be good enough to keep it within 17 points at home. I mean, goodness gracious, they were ranked in the top 10 last week. I mean, Arkansas was. So you're telling me they're getting 17 points at home. That's what you're telling me, yes?
That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I heard you right because I'm taking the Hogs. Ooh, pig, hooey. Yeah. So.
I hate I've given you that opportunity now. No more Arkansas games on the list this season. You're going to take it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to take the points. It's a big number.
I am not. I hope that Sam Pittman has got the entire liquor cabinet filled up because he's going to need it because I don't know why the Crimson Tide are going to wipe them up and down the field. I kind of feel like. So we're going to diverge here on this one as well. I'm going with Alabama minus 17.5. Chris will roll with the Hogs there. North Carolina State, Clemson, man, interesting to me, of course, because the Red Raiders were on the field with NC State here, and curious to see if the Wolfpack can gain any further validation here. They're a touchdown underdog going to Clemson, Chris. Tigers or Wolfpack?
This is a game that NC State won last year, and in many ways, it's a road game, so it's not exactly the same thing, but in many ways, this is their UT game in 08 for NC State. It all points to this one. They may have a letdown later on, but this whole season is about this game for the NC State Wolfpack. And you're telling me I get a touchdown. I'm going to take it. I don't know if Clemson is quite right yet. They played a lengthy, emotional, stressful game against Wake Forest last week. Clemson may in fact win this game, but you give me a touchdown, I'm going to take it. I just don't think NC State's going to screw much up. We've seen how good they are on defense. I know they're on the road and all that stuff, but I can't wait to sit down and watch that one on Saturday night. But I'm going to take the Wolfpack, and I think Dave Doran's a classy guy. He's got a good team. It's an old team. I don't think they'll be too big for the moment, but I may take NC State to win this one outright. So.
Ooh, okay. The spirit of Bryce Ramirez will propel them. I feel like we're going to be in agreement on this one as well. I like NC State plus 7. Pulling off the win outright, I might want to ride with as well, but definitely with that touchdown, Chris. And I just feel like you go on the road, that's kind of negated possibly by some experience. You got a bunch of old heads running around for NC State as we figured out. And then I'm just thinking as well, when you're talking about a football team like what you're describing there that emotionally has got, the perceived Goliath there to go and slay, and you can kind of build off of what you did a season ago, and that Goliath just had the taxing week that Clemson did, as you alluded to. I don't know. There's a whole lot that sets up here, I think, really well for North Carolina State to at least cover there, if not maybe pull off a big win on the road. And hey, I'd love to see it happen. Yeah, I agree with certainly the way that they were with Bryce after that game. And in general, it kind of made it easy to root for them maybe moving forward. As I said, it disgusted me, as it always does when someone just mops the floor with you and then is incredibly classy on the other side. Right. Repulsive.
This is a game, though, where Clemson will either say, this is still our league, and nobody should forget that, or it's going to be the game to where people say, yeah, Clemson isn't back from 2 years ago. Like, they're not playoff contender and all that. They're still kind of really good. They're just not elite. But that's the game this weekend versus NC State, in my opinion.
It should be a fun weekend, man. I hope the Red Raiders don't spoil the fun, because otherwise it could be a great Saturday. And maybe we're launching into that afternoon slate propelled by a Red Raider win in Manhattan. Chris, looking forward to it. And, of course, we'll have plenty on the other side, one way or another, but hoping for a win. As you continue to get primed for the weekend, make sure to make Locked On Big 12 your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network with Josh Neighbors. As we mentioned, it's going to be a wild schedule in the Big 12 Conference this weekend. So a whole lot to get geared up for. Do it with Josh Neighbors and Locked On Big 12. Looking forward to it, Chris. Enjoyed the week and should have another good one on tap this weekend to discuss next week.
Absolutely, man. Don't turn it over. Don't commit too many penalties. You got a chance. Okay? Got a chance. Keep hope alive, people. We'll talk to you over the weekend.
There you go. He's the only Chris Level. I'm KC Cowan. Thanks for joining us on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. Subscribe. And before you forget, subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. And one more thing to wrap up the week. Just please subscribe on YouTube. All right. On the Locked On Podcast Network, you got it. It's Locked On Texas Tech.